You're tuned into WestLINK.
Welcome, everybody. Good to have you with us at another WestLINK program where we connect to talk about relevant topics, and we appreciate you joining us this afternoon. I would like to invite you to please, if you're watching, like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We'd greatly appreciate that. And remember, this program is an interactive one. While the discussion is going on, we would like you to be a part of the process. If you have a question, if you have a comment to make that is germane to the subject matter, we'd love to hear from you, and we would do our best to answer all relevant questions and relevant issues pertaining to this program. This afternoon, we have our very capable Lady Tricia Rawl, who will be hosting our program this afternoon. And so we pray that God will bless and that God will give us wisdom as we proceed into the future. Let's hear now what this discussion has to bring to our lives.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Pastor Nichols. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tricia, and I will be your host for this afternoon's program, Planning Together, My Loved One and Me, Part 2. This afternoon's program was put together by the Seniors Ministry Department. Throughout our program this afternoon, we'll be delving into topics that, can be quite honest, not the most comfortable to discuss. You don't really want to talk about it, but we do need to. The conversation this afternoon will focus on three main topics, namely wills, fraud, and funeral arrangements. We will have three panelists. Our panelists will be Andre Campbell, who is a lawyer, Alvin Ram from the Ontario Conference, and Luann Jones from Covenant House Funeral Home. Before we get into the main topics, we wanted to highlight a topic that is serious, and it's disconcerting, and it's very delicate, and it's difficult to discuss in any setting, but it's definitely something to address. The topic is elder abuse. Elder abuse comes in various forms, financial and emotional, and also physical, to name a few. If you are aware or suspect that someone may be facing elder abuse and they are living in a long-term care facility, please reach out to the Ministry of Health and file a complaint, make a report. If the individual isn't within a facility, i.e. long-term care or retirement, you will want to reach out to the Advocacy Center for the Elderly. This particular agency is a community-based legal clinic for low-income seniors. At this point, we'll actually take a look at a video that rings true to what we'll be discussing this afternoon. The video is a promotion for our planning and giving trust services with the Ontario Conference.
Time is unpredictable. We just don't know what will happen next. While each unfolding day remains a mystery, God showers us with overflowing blessings so we may realize that life is actually an exciting journey. With these blessings, God expects us to become faithful stewards and generous channels so He can bless others through us. One couple in the islands of Romblon, Philippines, lives in a property which they believe God has generously entrusted to them to develop for God's service. Ike and Jerby are retirees who devoted their time developing this 3-hectare land to become useful for the Lord's work. While making use of their time, they dedicated their attention, money, and effort to improve this property to become a camping site for the Adventist youth.
Well, even before we acquire this property, we have already a plan to share to the work of the Lord. That is to provide a campsite for our young people. And the Lord is wise enough to give us this property. And so we use it right after we buy it. Young people come around and have their camping and they enjoy their activities here.
So when we acquired this property, so I said, we will give this to the Lord. We will develop this place and give it to the Lord. Anyway, our children can survive and many will be blessed yet. Our time is so short. We want that the work of the Lord will be finished. So we want to give what has been given to us to the Lord so that it will help His and His return.
A generous life is not learned in an instant, but it is acquired through experiences and opportunities to give and to be a channel of blessings to others.
One time, it was Friday and supposed to be payday. We were not able to receive our salary, but we prepared our tithe to be given on the Sabbath. So we have nothing, and we pray to God for a means where we can get our supply until the salary arrived. So we went to the church, and a youth approached me and told me that he has prepared a sack of kamote for us. On the following day, Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, a woman also told us that she has brought us 2 bunches of bananas. So we gladly receive it. We know that the Lord is very good because He knows that we are returning His property, His money.
If we are faithful in returning what is the Lord's, the Lord will surely bless us.
Ike and Jerby were inspired to share what God has blessed them with and to leave a legacy of generosity to those who will follow behind.
Since we are really the steward of the Lord, we are not the owner of everything. Everything is the Lord's. So my message to our brethren that they should remember that we are transient in this world. We are passing. We want to help hasten the coming of the Lord. So by returning what is in us, it might help. It might help hasten the Lord's work. So time will come. We cannot use it anymore. What shall we do if we cannot use? While there is time yet and it can be used, give it to the Lord so that it will help hasten His return.
Good afternoon. I would like to welcome Andre Campbell to our program. With Andre, we'll be looking at wills, power of attorney, and fraud. Good afternoon, Andre. How are you?
Hi, Trisha, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Perfect. How are you this afternoon, Andre?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Excellent. I'm doing well. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful day outside.
Okay.
Let's just jump right into the topic at hand. So this afternoon, I just wanted to, we're going to be discussing wills, power of attorney, and fraud. But Andre, could you give us some background information on yourself, please, and thanks?
Oh, sure. My very first job after completing university was as a computer programmer, working within the court. And while developing and implementing systems within the courts, was a pretty interesting time for me because I also studied the law full time. So that was an interesting time for me to see firsthand how some of these cybersecurity and data privacy issues unfold within the court. So here I am today. Fast forward, 2020. I'm now fortunate enough to marry both my passions, technology and law. And I actually work now in the cybersecurity space with a global team where we actually investigate cyber investigations. So if there's a data breach,
Wow.
we go in, we try to figure out, what the root cause is, and we provide some recommendations. So it's a pretty interesting space to be in, because as you can
Right.
imagine, when you have an incident, not only are there technical ramifications that might flow from a data breach, there are also
Right.
ramifications as well. So
Okay.
I think both that technical and legal background has afforded me the opportunity to be in this space.
Wow. And you know what the blessing is, that you're able to utilize, as you said at the beginning, both of your skills, that they marry really nicely together. So I think that's an excellent thing. So first question off the bat is, what is the purpose of finding legal counsel, and should every senior have one?
Well, that's
It's a loaded question, yes.
yeah, it is a loaded question, and I think it's a good question as well. Because you have a lot of persons who say, you know what, I already have an accountant managing my affairs, I already have a financial planner, like, why do I need a lawyer? But before I answer that question though, Trisha, I want to touch on the importance of seniors even having a will, the purpose of having a will in the first place.
Okay.
Because the reality is, estate planning is a subject matter that individuals try to avoid like the plague.
Yes.
And for many different reasons,
Yeah, it can be daunting.
Most persons don't want to even have, the conversation, because it involves thinking about death and planning for death, and we'd rather not have that discussion. But I think a lot of the discomfort with the topic is the stigma that surrounds wills.
Right.
And I think it's important for us to shift the way that we think about wills. And
absolutely,
what I mean by that is, for example, and I'll just throw in 2 examples by what I mean by that. So with estate planning, I'd say it's not that much different from doing your budget planning, right?
Okay.
So for those of us who have a monthly budget, you're able to track your expenses, and you can allocate emergency funds in a way that makes sense. I think will in that sense. The other way that I think about wills is, I see it similar to voting, and I know it seems a bit weird, to say, how is that, how does it correlate to voting, but remember, we're talking about property, right? Assets, money,
absolutely,
things that we've worked hard for over the years, right? Things that we've earned and achieved and accumulated over time.
Right.
Where those items go, really, I think should be up to you. You have that fundamental right to determine where to go. And also, you can imagine when you vote, or when you decide not to vote, your decision can actually have an impact on the individuals around you. Right. For example, with voting, the policies that we vote for can potentially impact generations. Right. The same line of thinking with estate planning. If you have a will or you don't have a will, in many instances that might affect those individuals around you.
Right. And I think the examples that you gave of thinking of it like a vote, or how you do your budget, I think those are very tangible things that we all have in our daily lives. So thinking of a will like that, and how you want your life as well as your assets to be divided, if you will, once you're gone, I think is a really tangible way of looking at it. So since we've jumped into wills, are there different types of wills? I've heard conversations over the years of having, say, for example, you get into an accident of sorts and you're incapable of taking care of yourself. Is there such a thing as a living will that someone could have in place in the event of an accident and they're unable to fend for themselves, make decisions for themselves?
So when we're talking about estate planning, so it really refers to a series of documents that governs your affairs. So the one document we're all familiar with is the wills. So the will is basically what governs the distribution of your assets after you die. Right. So we're talking about estate planning. So what is in place to manage your assets and your properties and your personal care while you're alive? So I think a lot of persons mention living will. Oh, and just a caveat, in Ontario law, we don't recognize the term living will.
Right.
I think what a lot of persons refer to when they mention living will is what they call an advance directive. And this
Okay.
is basically a document that, says, you basically outline what should happen in the event that, you need medical care, or, for whatever reason you don't have, the competency to make,
Right.
decisions about, your health. So I think when they mention living will, I think that's what they're referring to.
Okay.
As relates to power of attorney, there
Thank you.
are two key documents. So there is a power of attorney that governs your property,
Right.
and there's also the document that governs your personal care. So
So sorry, Andre, just to interject right there. So when we now have a power of attorney as well, and does that work in conjunction with the other? Sorry, I don't remember the other title that you had mentioned to me before. In regards to having that person in place if something is to happen, an advance directive. Sorry, an advance directive. Are those two separate items? So an advance directive as well as a power of attorney, are they the same thing? Or are they two separate entities that we're talking about?
Technically, from a legal standpoint, they are separate, but what a lot of persons do, they incorporate that advance directive within their personal, within their power of attorney for personal care.
Okay, perfect. All right.
And just to circle back again to the importance of having legal counsel as well. The truth is, and I'll just be very frank, you don't need a lawyer to do a will. In fact, you can have what's called a holographic will. The will is written entirely by hand.
Right.
So I just want to make that disclaimer. You don't necessarily need a lawyer to do a will. However, I quickly hasten to say though that there are some key things to consider when preparing a will, especially when it comes to seniors. And because of how we've seen how these issues pan out in court, we typically recommend that individuals retain legal counsel. So, for example, with respect to seniors, one of the most contentious issues that we've come across is this whole idea of capacity. So, unfortunately, there's this stigma that seniors may at times, become disoriented. So, the question becomes, did the individual have the mental capacity to even prepare the will? Was the individual capable of understanding and appreciating, the extent of their assets? So a part of a lawyer's job is to assess that, the individual in fact understands the nature of the assets. And, you also mentioned elder abuse as well. So, the lawyer also has a professional and ethical duty as to whether there's any undue influence. So, for example, if the individual is being coerced by a family member to distribute in a particular way, the lawyer is there to, provide guidance on some of those issues. And then the last point as well to consider, it might seem trivial, but just a step of understanding what you own, what's even being distributed, and a lot of seniors, they have property in different jurisdictions. So, and then become, do I need one will? Do I need multiple wills? Are there any tax implications? To what extent, will the other jurisdiction recognize?
A variety of things to consider for sure. Exactly.
So there's a lot to consider. And because there's so many issues, to unpack, we typically recommend seeking legal counsel.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all that information, Andre. At this point in time, I'm going to jump over to Alvin and we'll circle back around to you, Andre. So Alvin Ram is from the Ontario Conference. Good afternoon, Alvin. How are you?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm well.
Excellent. Prior to us getting into our discussion, we saw a video earlier in regards to planning, giving, and trust. I think the video did a really good job in highlighting some of the things that we're talking about in our program this afternoon. Could you give us a bit of background on exactly what it is that you do for the Ontario Conference?
So I am the director of Planned Giving and Trust Services, and we basically do what Andre was discussing. Is we do two things. First, we sit down with our church members and we have that difficult discussion. And once we start talking, individuals start realizing, like he said, this is just a regular part of business. God has blessed us with what we have, and we're stewards of whatever God has given to us. Some people have a lot, and some people don't have so much. But we all have something. And with whatever we have a responsibility to be in control of what happens to it.
Right.
Otherwise, if we leave it to chance, there could be government involvement that comes in, or
Right.
somebody else that you may not want to have involved. So we look at what the individual has, and we'll say, okay, if you don't plan, this is what potentially could be happening. And especially, let's say someone has minor children,
Right.
and now all of a sudden something happens to mom or dad. Well, now what happens to the kids? The will is going to allow you to set up guardianship or a trust. So there's a lot of power that you have within that will that you can really designate things the way that you want to.
Right.
And once you look at that situation, you can craft something, of course, with the lawyer's help to meet their needs.
Okay. I'm glad that you brought out the point of if somebody has loved ones, families in place. What if somebody has no one? What if there is nobody in place to, like, say, for example, I have no children, my mother and father have passed, and God forbid, I die, and I have no will in place. Could you guide me through what that could potentially look like?
So I can give you a real life example.
Perfect.
Years ago, I met with a little old lady in Toronto, and she had no next of kin. She was the last of her line.
Right.
And so she had decided, she wanted to leave whatever she had, just like in the video, to the Lord's work.
Right.
And so she decided, I want to give that all to Camp Frenda.
Okay.
And so she went ahead, she made her will, and then 11 years later, she passed away.
Okay.
And so when she passed away, she had a plan in place. And just, I would say God really had a plan in there that the camp needed beds, and they needed about $76,000. And that is what she
Wow.
had. And so
Wow.
the $76,000 that she had put in her will
Yeah.
went to the camp to buy the bed. So if you go to Camp Frenda and have a good night's sleep,
Yeah.
that was done as a result of somebody who planned ahead, and they planned to, remember somebody that would benefit from it. Now, to answer your question, if she did not have a will and she didn't have any next of kin, well, then the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee would have come in to settle her affairs.
Okay.
And if there's nobody to get it, well, who do you think is going to benefit?
The government.
The government will gladly take that. Yes.
Right. Right. So could you just repeat the title again? Public. Oh, I'm so sorry.
So
Gotta love
this
technology.
is the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee.
Perfect. All right. So you mentioned that this is a program via the Ontario Conference. Is this particular program only available to Seventh-day Adventist members?
It is. And so, again, it is open. Now, I should say that we do get requests from people throughout the province of Ontario. And so even though I'm not able to go through the entire process, if anyone calls me, I do send them the packet of information that we do use. And
Right.
we send that, and we'll have maybe a little brief discussion. Now, of course, I'm not a lawyer like Andre, so I will not get into any type of a legal discussion or offer any legal advice.
Right.
But we do work with a law office. And so then the folks that we do work with, we start the process, we do an intake form, have that first discussion, and then we send them either to a lawyer that we are affiliated with close to the office, or the church member may have somebody else that they want to go to. So, let's say, for example, they wanted to go to Andre. They're
Right.
free to go to whoever they wish to.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much for that information. We're just going to jump back to Andre to get a little bit more information about fraud. I think we touched on it briefly before, but just want to make sure that everyone's aware of what some of our seniors lay prey to, as well as people within society. So, Andre, in regards to fraud last year in Ontario, how many people or seniors experienced fraud last year?
Last year, so I don't have access to the actual numbers for last year, but I do have a statistic that came out back in 2004. So the Department of Justice reported that almost 10% of seniors in Canada are victims of crime, and the vast majority of those crimes are financial abuse and fraud. And I think this is significant because if we go back to the census that was done in 2004, that 10% would include about 2 million individuals between the ages of 65 and 74, just between 65 and 74. And I dare say that as more seniors, are going online and becoming more tech savvy, I do believe, there has been an increase in the numbers as well. And if we even go back to earlier this year, as early as April, I believe the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, they reported that they actually received just under 20,000 reports of fraud, totaling to just about $23 million. And the thing to note again, with these numbers is that many of these instances of fraud, they actually go unreported. So we have been seeing a spike in the number of fraud-related matters in relation to seniors.
Okay. How can individuals protect themselves against fraud?
That again is a very I won't
What
say,
are some safeguards they can put into place?
I won't say misleading question, because I want to quickly say that although we're focusing on the seniors today, the risk associated with fraud and identity theft should be on everyone's radar. Right.
Absolutely, for sure.
The reality is, it's not so much about protecting, because the reality is anyone can become a victim. It's more about mitigating those risks. And I'll just quickly just say for myself, I was the victim of identity theft a few years ago, and even as this year, a threat actor was able to get into one of my accounts, and they did what they did. So no one is immune. So I just want to throw that out.
For sure.
So what we should be discussing really is how to increase awareness and mitigate those risks. So as it relates to the seniors, what I would say is never disclose personal information over the phone unless you're able to verify the legitimacy of the call. Because, we're seeing a spike in COVID-related scams. So these fraudsters, they're calling, these seniors and saying, hey, we have free masks available to you. All you have to do is pay the shipping, and stuff like that. So just be cognizant of that. Refrain from giving your personal information over the phone, unless, as I said, you're able to verify the legitimacy of the call. The other thing that I would suggest as well is shred
Yes.
as much as possible. And if you have a shredder, try and redact your personal information. So your utilities, your statements, because what fraudsters actually tend to do, one of the methods that they use is called dumpster diving, where they actually go through dumpsters on the curb and even trash cans, and they try to see if there are any bank statements or utility statements to get as much information about you. And then again, remember that we all leave digital footprints in the cyberspace, right? So in some way, shape, or form, the fraudster is able to take that piece of information and perhaps go on the social media and do some social engineering, maybe interacting with someone and piece all the puzzle together. So that's because we can't of that as well.
Absolutely. And I think those are really great points and great tools to definitely put into place in our personal lives, as you highlighted. Thank you so much for all that information, Andre. So at this point, we've learned about wills, power of attorneys, and what the Ontario Conference has to offer to us. At this point, we're going to jump over to Luann Jones, who is the funeral director at Covenant Funeral Home. Good afternoon, Luann. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Just enjoying this heat, because at some point it will go, right? Just wanted to get some more information from you. What is your role at the funeral home that you're at?
So I'm the owner and managing funeral director of Covenant Funeral Home. We're actually Canada's first Black-owned and operated funeral home here in Canada. So we've made history many years.
Fantastic.
Coming up to our 5th year serving families, serving the greater Toronto area and surrounding areas proudly in all capacities that we possibly can.
Perfect. Luann, do you think that it is best for individuals to have a pre-planned funeral, and why?
Absolutely. With anything, my philosophy has been planning must be implemented. So in the cases where people have the opportunity to plan, it makes life much more simple and guarantees that peace of mind. And essentially, peace of mind is priceless.
Right.
Nobody can pay for that.
Right.
In the years that I've been doing or serving families, I've yet to have a family say to me, you know what, Luann, pre-planning was one of the worst things we ever did.
Right.
You'll find that it's comforting to know that a loved one has put things in place, from the type of service that they'd like to have, down to the clothing, down to the hymns, down to who they would love to have them carry them out. So all of these things could be implemented, and again, making life for loved ones so much easier.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Just wanted to interject before we carried on, Luann, to our online audience. If you guys have any questions that you would like to ask us, please definitely feel free to pop them in, and we'll definitely get to them as soon as possible. Luann, in terms of the cost of a funeral, I wanted to kind of get an understanding of the cost of a funeral versus a cremation, because I know that there's some people who are more interested in one more than the other. Could you just walk us through what the cost would look like?
Sure. Well, again, two types of services. You could either be cremated, well, three. There's actually new services now that have been implemented. We call them, in the industry, the terms are methods of disposition. So you could either be buried, you can be cremated. There's a new form called resumation. So resumation is basically you're not being disposed by fire, you're not being buried in the earth, but you're actually being liquefied. So that's another term, resumation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. How long has that process been around now? Is it that's really new, like the last 2 years?
It's a new process. It's only been around for a few years, and there are very limited number of funeral homes that are able to provide that service right now, and it was based on regulation as well. So a lot of the red tape has been cut, and it's becoming more acceptable within the communities, and people are interested in hearing a little bit more about it.
Okay.
Now, in terms of services and costs, when you're breaking down services that the funeral home will provide versus burial costs, they're two separate costs, but they're combined together as a funeral.
Okay.
So on average, and I can speak on the funeral home side, the average funeral would probably cost about $7,500.
Okay.
Implementing or adding cemetery to that, you're probably looking at about $16,000 to $17,000. So it depends on, again, that would be in a burial case.
Right.
In a cremation case, you'll probably be looking close to, for a traditional service, you're probably be looking close to, I would say, about $8,000, including cremation and taxes.
It's a costly venture either which way you go, and it's something it is, yes.
And people say, well, you know what, this is so much money, and I said, well, thinking about it honestly, you only have to pay it once.
Right. It sounds sad, but it's true. It's a one-time payment, and like you were saying before, if you're, as we've discussed throughout the wills and the other segment that we just did, if you're thinking of it like as a budget, and you go through this on a monthly basis, or how often you can do it, and slowly put aside and put away for it and plan for it, because it is the inevitable that this is going to happen, then it does make it a little bit more palatable. Because I think if somebody has to put up $10,000 at once, that could present some challenges for some, that's for sure. Just in terms of, have you come across, I've heard things of, like, when people are planning their funerals for their loved ones, and they want this elaborate funeral, and considering the cost that associated with funerals, have you come across family members or individuals who have, alluded to the fact that, because the presentation of how the funeral looks, so the flowers, the type of coffin, the venue, if they don't put a lot of money into the funeral, that they feel that the loved one may not feel as loved, or they don't think that they did their best for their family member or the individual. Have you come across that kind of situation before?
We've had those situations before, and again, it's based upon how that person lived their life and how that person was actually treated during life. You have instances where people feel guilty about not being able to provide, certain levels of care for their loved ones. So they want to display and show, yes, this is how much we love mom, or how much we love dad. Again, it's individual. The industry itself is very emotional, and you'll be making emotional decisions.
Right.
And unfortunately, within the industry, you'll have those providers that will basically thrive on people's emotions.
Right.
So, you would love to have the best for your mother, or you'd love to have, the top of the line casket for your father because, your father deserved it. And well, deep in your heart, yeah, dad did deserve it, or mom did deserve it. But at the end of the day, you really can't afford it.
Right.
So we have to be practical. Within our company, we deal with families as we would our own families, and are mindful of budgets. And even with a minimal budget, that funeral can still look exceptional. And at the same time, that family is assured that budget is well within their means, and they haven't extended their hands further than they could reach, so to speak.
Right.
So for us, that's important because we don't want to overcharge families. And at the same time, at the end of the month, they're not able to meet their rent payments, or, they're not able to make their mortgage payments. So we definitely have to be mindful and considerate of the costs for families as well. And I think that's why a lot of families find comfortability and affordability in the services that we provide.
I'm so glad that you highlighted the fact that, it is an emotional experience, and sometimes various agencies play on your emotions. And just it's a good reminder for us to be cognizant of the fact of what is actually happening, and not to get, I'm not going to say caught up. I'm using that very loosely right now, so please don't hold it against me. But just to get caught up in that moment, because in truth, it is that particular moment and time. And literally, once that act is done, or, you've done the burial and all that kind of stuff, you still have to figure out how to grieve, how to move forward in life. So there has to be a balance of sort. And I'm glad that you brought that up. We're going to pause just at this point. We're going to go to a video in regard called Secret Place, and then we'll come back. Thank you.
This world sometimes seems cruel and cold, and pain doth pierce my very soul. But there's a place, a secret place, a place where I can go. Justice reigns and God resides. place. There is a place, a secret place, a place where I can go. Ooh, a secret place, a dwelling place. Lord, I wanna go, I wanna go, I wanna go.
Welcome back, everyone. Just wanted to bring back our panelists together so we can have a wholesome discussion. So we'll bring back Andre Campbell, Alvin Ram, and Luann Jones. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Everyone is well?
Oh, yeah.
We're almost there. We're doing very well. I think we've gained some good ground on the topics that we've been discussing, and I think our audience is appreciating the subject matter for what it is and trying to take it in as best as possible. We do have some questions that we will be able to facilitate at this point in time. I don't know if we can all see them. I'll just read the question out. For those who don't have pre-planned their funeral arrangements, what advice do you have for those seeking to make arrangements for their loved ones who have passed?
For those of you who haven't made pre-planned arrangements, it's essential that you're educated. Try and gather as much information as you can on services, what your options are, what you need, what you don't need. Again, there are things that you do require. You need basic services. You need a container or a casket. You may or may not need preparation. And the situation has changed so much with COVID that the entire industry has changed. COVID has brought to light a lot of things that are not required. And things are essentially essential in this case. So, right now existing, gone are the days where traditionally we would have our 2 to 3 hour service.
Right.
We would have our, couple hundreds of people visiting and coming to attend a service and coming to graveside, limited from 5 up to 10, now currently to 50 people. You learn to appreciate who your close circle are and who you want to feel included within that circle. My thing is many will call, but only few will be chosen to attend those funerals. So again, you need to know who the important people are, what type of services you would like to have. Do you want something private and intimate? Do you want it open to the public? And be mindful of what your budgets are as well during this time as well.
Just to piggyback on what you said there, Luann, in terms of we're in the COVID season right now, in the middle of a pandemic, and we're looking at funerals differently. What are some creative ways people, if you have any experience, that people have kind of made adjustments to make sure that they've included more than the allowance of the 10 or the 50 people? What are some creative ways that people have utilized to ensure that they try to get as many people involved as possible?
So thank goodness for technology. We've been using our free social media platforms.
Amen.
Even prior to COVID, we've used Facebook, we've used WhatsApp, Facebook specifically using watch parties. So we would hold or host a private group specifically for that family, invitation only, so that the loved ones overseas can see what's actually going on in real time.
Right.
We could videotape the service and send it, but you won't have that same effect. So what we're doing is we're using our devices and we're being your eyes when you cannot physically be here.
Right.
So in terms of into the room, we're walking as you would normally walk. We're looking at flowers. We're showing you the cards, the names on those cards, the details of the flowers, and then slowly panning up to that person's face in the casket, pausing there for a moment as you would have normally when you're paying your respects. And then slowly backing away and then facing the visitors, facing the guests, and kind of being interactive, within that particular service. So that's one thing that we've been doing. Secondarily, we've just implemented what we call our drive-through visitations. So again, drive-throughs, we're incorporating our social mediums, but we're allowing the drive-throughs. So the deceased will be placed outside in a canopy covered. We have a canopy for the family members. And then we have areas whereby designated cars will come through, have a look at the deceased, and it's presentable close enough for them to actually see. And then they would just drive off or pay respects to the family and then drive off. So we've been able to accommodate, hundreds of people coming through that technically wouldn't have normally been able to pay the respects based on the directives and the limitations that we are governed by at this time.
Okay. Andre and Alvin, could you guys lend some insight to how your services have been able to adapt during this time as well?
All right, so I'll go first. So as Luan mentioned, COVID has changed a lot. And I think one of the things that it has changed is the mindset and the perspective that people have around wills. And I alluded to that before as well, in terms of the importance of shifting, that perspective.
Right.
That I've seen, individuals being more open, to having that discussion around, their estate planning. I'm not sure what my fellow brother has been experiencing in the field.
So I can definitely add to what Andre has said. I know there's some statistics that we have read. They've said that will making has gone up quite substantially. And we have always been, fairly busy throughout the year. But as soon as everything went under lockdown, then we got a lot of phone calls. And we were not able to meet with individuals. And so what we actually had to do was start using Zoom or get on the telephone, and people were starting to, have that openness to have this difficult discussion, because now they were seeing what was happening around them, which then got into the whole thought of what we talk about is the planning. You want to make sure that you're covered before anything like this happens so that you don't have to worry. So definitely, we've had to change our operations to keep up with the demand, but definitely people are interested and they're open to those discussions right now.
Right, and just to add on to that, Alvin, for those of us, who are streaming online, who are believers, we certainly have a different perspective when it comes to life, right? We do recognize that, as a result of sin, death is something that, we all will continue to struggle with, until our Creator comes back. But you know what? One of the hard realities of life that I think that we almost come to terms with, and that's what I've been seeing in terms of the shift in mindset, is whether you're a believer or not, the fact that things do happen.
Right.
It's an accident or a terminal illness, and we're seeing that being we're seeing that today with COVID. Things really happen, and having your affairs in order is very important.
Absolutely, for sure. At this point, we'll go to our audience for a question, our online audience. I'll read it out loud. If I have an existing will, how do I make changes?
So I'll jump on that. So there are really two ways you can make changes to a will. You can either revoke it outrightly. Technically, how it works is the most recent will would revoke the previous will. But if you want to make an intentional effort to change your will, you can either intentionally revoke the previous will, or you can have what they call a codicil, where you make a very specific change to the previous will. So there are really two main ways to change your will. I'm not sure what the specific circumstances are around that particular question, but those are just the very two main ways of changing a will.
Just to clarify, Andre, when you say revoke, what exactly do you mean by revoking a will?
By revoking a will, it means the previous one is null and void. It no longer exists.
So would you have to put that in writing to
Yeah.
revoke that? Okay, just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify that.
So you can do that, or in the event that there's a discrepancy, or say for instance we come up with two wills. We have identified two wills. How the law treats that, they deem the most recent will the valid will. So
Okay.
the previous will would be revoked. So that's more from the perspective of the operation of the law. But if you want to, a more intentional effort of changing your will, you would make a specific statement saying, "I hereby revoke my previous will."
Perfect. Thank you so much. At this point, we'll just see if the audience has any more questions.
I saw a question earlier. I'm trying to scroll up.
Oh, to see if we can find it again. Okay, thank you. That would be great.
Oh yeah, I got it from Walter. It says, "We got married in Niagara Falls, Canada, in the Little Wedding Chapel on June 4, 2019. Congrats! That's actually one day before my birthday, on June 5th. I had my own will for medical care and my money. How do I set up everything on my wife's name? We did not change her name to the married name." So again, I'm not quite sure what the specific circumstances are around this case. Oh, and by the way, let me just put a disclaimer. Anything we discuss on this program does not constitute legal advice.
Good point.
But so again, I'm not quite sure what the circumstances are. If it is that he wants to keep his previous will and keep his wife's will, I'm not quite sure if that's the
question.
Concern. But if that's a concern, he needs to get some information around what we call mutual wills or mirror wills. If that is the case, if he wants to keep his previous will and his wife keeps previous will, so there's no conflict, I would suggest him, just seeking some advice around that.
Alvin, just wanted to get a little bit more information in terms of the giving services. Do you find that as Adventists, like for example, myself being an Adventist, this is my first time since I've been on this, we're doing this discussion today, that I've actually heard of those services offered. How do you guys promote those services that you offer to make sure that, because I've never heard of it before, so how do we, make sure that the masses, how do you get it out to the masses?
So I've heard many times that we're the best kept secret in the Ontario Conference because the service that we do provide is a free service to our church members. So it's something that if you have membership in the conference, you're entitled to take advantage of. And what we normally do, like we're doing right now, when there was no COVID, I would be out in the churches Sabbath afternoon or during an AY, and the pastor would bring us in, or for seniors groups, or even for family life, whatever it is, stewardship. We'd be out there when we're called and we're asked. And we basically, I guess, most of the pastors, I would say, know that this department exists in the conference. And they would, if they come across a church member that says, I have this issue, they would say, get in touch with Alvin at the conference, and we would start that discussion. And sometimes they want to follow through, and sometimes they don't. But that's okay, because our job is to educate and at least arm you with the information.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Just wanted to ask everyone just to kind of share a bit of like the key highlights that you want our audience to take away from each of your various designations, just to ensure that we've given a lot of really good information, but sometimes when because of our forum and the time that we've given to this particular subject matter, it will never be enough. But at the same time, what I'd like everyone to have is a good takeaway from our segment that we've offered them today. So if you could think of, a couple of pieces that you would want to make sure that our audience has to leave with? Some good nuggets, if you will.
For me, so I'll jump in. So for me, one of the biggest takeaways for me is, as it relates to estate planning, it's important to shift that mindset. And we talked about it earlier. We stressed the importance of estate planning. It's important to shift that mindset. I hope leaving this discussion, persons will no longer be avoiding estate planning discussions like the plague anymore.
Right.
So I'm really hoping, that we shift our mindset. And as I said, think about it like, budgets, just figuring out, how best, to manage your affairs. And think about it as voting. It's your fundamental right. Just think about it. I mean, this is your property. You've worked hard over the years to accumulate these things. You should have a say in how that gets distributed. And on the cybersecurity side, I just want to just remind everyone that this is not an issue that's specific to seniors. It should be on everyone's radar.
That's right.
And let's just try as best as possible to mitigate those risks.
For sure. Excellent tidbits, for sure. Thank you so much. Alvin.
I would definitely say, just to go on to what Andre said, I would just say the word planning. Plan while you can. Plan while you are in control and you're in charge, and see the right people. I have seen both sides of the coin. I have seen individuals that have planned their wills, and when they've passed away, things have gone smoothly. They've pre-planned their funerals, and when people are grieving, it's a blessing for them to know that everything's been taken care of. And then I've seen the other side where folks, let's say, decided not to do a will, and now the ones that are left behind, there's chaos that ensues. And when it's time to have the funeral, nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows what they want. So to me, as we discuss this topic, it's really an act of love on my part. So, and I'll just share a little tidbit. I was one of those folks, and I know I'm a believer, that I thought if I did a will, it was going to kill me. I will say this: I've done my will twice, and I'm still living.
All right.
So here.
And I looked at it and I said,
Thank you so much for that. And Luann, just for you, some good info.
And again, it's going. I would say, again, funerals is about we come to grips with our own mortality, and in doing so and dealing, we need to make sure that things are planned properly for our family, our loved ones that we've left behind. That mindset where, you start speaking to a funeral director, and that's going to hasten your death. I remember years ago when I would introduce myself to people, and they would say, "Oh, what do you do? Or do you work for an airline?" And like, "No, I work for a funeral home."
Right.
And the direction just completely shifts.
Right.
They don't want to speak to me because they feel that if they speak to me, something is going to happen to them.
Right.
So it's essential that we kind of get things in place, have that narrative, have that discussion with your family, and say, you know what, suppose something happened one day, what would you like to see from what you wouldn't like to see? And know that you can pay for it monthly over a span of time and forget about it. But most importantly, with the conference, there are a lot of benefits associated with it. The conference being one of our biggest supporters, we extend those savings to the members of the conference as well. And there are a number of questions here, one about repatriation or ship outs. Our ship outs, depending on the country that the body is going to, could be as low as $9,000, depending upon the services. And that is actually to get that person directly to where they're going. Another cost or another question was about direct or basic services. We provide any service that a family would like to have. It could be the most basic of basic. It could be most elaborate of elaborate. Again, each service is individually tailored to your needs. Specifically, we don't have cookie cutter packages. Package A, B, or C, choose one. No, it's whatever you wish to see, whatever you wish for your loved ones to participate in. That's how we contribute, and that's how we we tailor each of the services that we're providing for families.
Right.
So in terms of that nugget, have that conversation with your families. You don't want to rely on GoFundMe's. You don't want to rely on, the mercy and the benevolence funds that are available. You want to make sure that you get things your way. You want to be buried rather than, somebody saying, well, we can't afford burial, so we're going to have to cremate mom.
Right.
So those are all the things that people must take into consideration during this time. And
Awesome.
again, we're available. I'm available. You can call me directly any time of day. My number is listed there in the chat.
Right.
Have the discussion.
I think those are all really great nuggets, great takeaways that that you guys have shared. I saw one comment that was just on the screen. If we could get that comment back, that would be great. One of our viewers has shared, and I think it's definitely something that we can all take away as it sums up kind of what we've been discussing. Our viewer has says, to plan your estate, everyone, it doesn't matter how old you are or how much you have. Life is not forever. When you go, we are leaving people behind. You are planning for others, not yourself. Be kind to those you leave behind. And I think that's a really great way to think about it, because in truth, you're planning for what you would like to happen. You're planning for the inevitable, as we've discussed here. And I think it's important for you to think of the ones that that you're leaving behind. They're going to be in a process of grieving and trying to understand it. Some people will grieve and understand very differently. And the grieving process, I'm sure as we all know, for everyone is very different. So we have to be very cognizant of that. So with that being said, I just wanted to thank you guys, Andre, Alvin, and Luann, for definitely taking the time to share your specific designations with us, with all this information. It is really good information. I'm glad that I sat through this and I've hosted this, because myself and death I haven't had good experiences with death. And in my line of work, I've become more, I'm going to use the word very loosely, comfortable with it as it is a part of life. And I'm more appreciative now when it comes to when someone is dying and the process that it is. And I'm now in a shift where I'm looking at it more as of a celebration of life more than anything else. And that is the expectation that when you look back, once you've gone through life, this is my thought process now, that you should be somewhat pleased if you've gone through life in a good, decent way, let's say, or there should be some kind of joy in knowing that you've done as best as you can and that you're leaving your family in a good place. So to have these things, your wills, your power of attorney, and your funeral planned, I think is definitely it's a good thing to have in place. It's not, like, as we've said from the beginning, this is not an easy subject matter. It is very delicate, but at the same time, it is something that we do have to think about. And even think about now, we've been in isolation for how many months? We've definitely been able to adjust and do things differently. So our mindset has shifted and we realize what we value more than anything else. So on behalf of the Seniors Ministry Department, I would like to say thank you to you, our panelists, and I would like to say thank you to our online audience for sharing this time with us. This segment, as most of our segments for WestLINK, are posted and you're able to come back and view them. So I would definitely encourage you all to come back and view them, as it is something that is prevalent. So definitely take it and use it for yourself, and also share this resource with people that you may come in contact with. Take care, God bless, and enjoy the rest of your day.